news and notes in here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. As another day in the NFL, more stories, more news, more happenings here, John, as we're getting closer, about 2 weeks out from the NFL free agent period opening up?
Yeah, March 9th, 4 o'clock Eastern. So that's when the flag comes down, and you can bet there's going to be a lot of activity, as there always is, pretty much right away.
Yeah, and we know a lot of it. Go ahead.
Remember, they have that sort of negotiating period now, so you don't have to be as overt about wink deals. You can talk about contracts the two days before the period opens. So that makes things a little bit easier, but it was going to get done anyway. And really, the combine is where everybody gets together and sort of these deals start to get cobbled together. So you're going to start hearing the rumors in Indianapolis.
And we know that a lot of the rumors are surrounding quarterbacks here. You know, Romo, Cutler, Kirk Cousins. I mean, Cousins, are you starting to get a gut feeling that maybe there's a chance now that Cousins isn't back in Washington?
No, I'll tell you where that's coming from. It's coming from the Washington Redskins front office is a mess, and it has been a mess for years. And there's one constant with it, and that's obviously Daniel Snyder. But you have the team president, Bruce Allen, who's pretty much put a muzzle on the general manager, Scott McMullen. He's not allowed to talk about the team and their dealings. And think about that. If you're the general manager of a football team and you're not allowed to talk about the football team, that's what's going on in Washington. So a lot of people have speculated and said Kirk Cousins would like to get out of that mess, and perhaps that part of it's true, but the guy in charge and the guy making the decisions and the guy in power is Bruce Allen, the team president, and he's the guy who wants Cousins. So I find it very hard to believe he's going to change his mind last minute. Maybe if they throw that second overall pick at them, and I'm talking about San Francisco because people have put 2 and 2 together and said because Kyle Shanahan's out there, he has a history with Kirk Cousins and would like him. That's possibly true, but you really want to give up the second pick in the draft for Kirk Cousins?
No.
That's what it might cost. Plus, Mike, $20 million. So
yeah, because you got to sign him.
Yeah.
You mentioned McMullen. You mentioned how much disarray that front office is in. I mean, there's some the story out of Washington where Cooley, who now, of course, who played for the Skins, he now works for the Redskins radio, so this makes it even more odd. McMullen had a drinking problem, right? And he suggested on the radio that he resumed drinking after he had been fired because of alcohol issues in Seattle and San Francisco. So you're right. It sounds like a mess is happening down there.
Yeah, and that's a dirty little secret in the NFL is that, people work long hours and there's a lot of alcohol that fuels people, and it's hard on family lives. But, yeah, Scott McMullen's had an admitted history of alcohol abuse, and the fact that Chris Cooley went on the Redskins radio network, basically, which is owned by Daniel Snyder, has people in Washington saying, what's going on here? And the Redskins haven't gone on record and denied it. So they're sort of leaving the guy hanging out to dry at the very least. Perhaps he does have a problem, but it's clear, hey, the GM doesn't get along with the president. It seems like the owner is on the president's side. So, if that's the case, move on from the GM. Don't trash him. But then you talk about contracts and money. It all comes into play. But what the overriding theme to all of it is that the Washington Redskins are a joke, and they've been a joke for years as far as how they run their franchise.
Speaking of the Redskins, Jason Cole from the Preacher Report says the Redskins are quietly wondering if Tony Romo becomes available, if they would be able to go get him. Is that a sign that they're at least thinking of Plan B?
Well, that's like 2 + 2 + 2 + 2. That's like, the contemplation that they would put the franchise tag on Cousins, because they're certainly going to do that because they don't want to risk losing him for nothing, essentially. And then get the high pick from San Francisco, which, again, as we said, not only would San Francisco have to send a pick like that, but also pay the guy $20 million. And on that case, then you need a quarterback, and then could you possibly get Tony Romo? And the speculation from Dallas is Jerry Jones, who's very close to Tony Romo, said, look, I'll try to work things out so you can go to where you want, but there's one place you can't go, and that's Washington. So, again, that's 2 + 2 + 2. That's like 4 different moves. If that happened, I would be very, very surprised. Let's just say
Has
that.
there ever been a Redskin or a Dallas QB that landed in the nation's capital?
Maybe Babe Laufenberg was on the Reds. Certainly not at that level. But no, certainly not.
I mean, we think in Philly, in the Delaware Valley, where Eagles fans are, most of us think like the Eagles, Cowboys is like a big deal, but Cowboys and Redskins are those two really take it to another level.
Yeah, from Dallas's perspective, their biggest rival is the Redskins, and I get it from not only the Eagles but from the Giants' perspective, their biggest rivals are the Cowboys. The Cowboys don't feel that way. It's always been the Redskins. That's their deepest rivalry, and it can vary and change depending on who's good and who's bad at a particular time. But there's no question that Jerry Jones wants to steer Tony Romo away from Washington. And by the way, if you're the Washington Redskins, look, you're talking about a 36-year-old quarterback with a bad back that you're going to have to pay a lot of money. I'm not sure that makes sense for that team because it's a pretty talented roster. And I just think they would prefer to go long-term, whether that's Cousins or the second overall pick and one of the younger quarterbacks.
John, let's stick with quarterback for a minute. And there's a report out there that the Bears are actively seeking a trade partner for Jay Cutler. Any takers you see out there for Jay Cutler?
Yeah, and I'm actively seeking a Lamborghini right now. It's not going to happen. Who's going to trade for Jay Cutler? It's just everybody knows the Bears have to cut him. His contract is basically $12.5 million, plus he can get about $2.5 million more in bonuses if he were to play the entire season. So the number $15 million isn't that bad, but he's already earned all the guaranteed money on his contract. So there's no penalty from the Bears' perspective if they release him, and other teams are aware of this. So why are you going to give up even a 7th-round pick when you know if you want the guy, he's going to be free if you just bide your time? And then that's the second part of it. I believe Jay Cutler will be a starting quarterback somewhere next season, but he's not plan A anywhere. You prefer, whether it be trading for one of the young quarterbacks, Jimmy Garoppolo, A.J. McCarron, even Mike Lennon, or one of the potential draft choices. And if nothing pans out for you, then you would go after a Jay Cutler type as a bridge. And nobody's going to trade even a 6th or 7th round pick for him.
John, we'll take a look at some of these guys out here. First, I want to get your opinion on the Julius Thomas to Miami deal. This was a guy in Denver. I mean, he was a beast for a year, and then you go to Jacksonville, and it's like you're a free agent, and it's just not a good team, and you kind of fall off the map. Is he one of those tight ends that can be revitalized with Gaze and in that Miami offense? Is he like a missing piece for them?
Well, that's how Miami's going to try to sell it because he had so much success with Adam Gase in Denver, and that's really where he became a player. But remember the supporting cast in Denver, and especially the year they scored 600 points. And that's when Julius really became a star. You think about Demarius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders and Peyton Manning still at a high level throwing the football. He's not going to have that in Miami. Could he still be an effective player? Most of his issues in Jacksonville started with the fact he couldn't stay healthy, couldn't get on the field. So if he can be out there for 16 games, he could put up decent numbers, but I certainly wouldn't expect a return to what he was in Denver simply because the supporting cast is not the same.
John McMullen with us. Now, John, there's some reports that the Steelers might not re-sign free agent wide receiver Markus Wheaton. Is he a guy the Eagles should be interested in? Averaged 17 yards per catch in 2015. Some injury issues, though. Maybe a one-year kind of prove-it deal?
Yeah, well, I do think he's the type of player they should be interested in. It would certainly be more than that. He's talented enough that he's going to get multiple years from somebody. But he's the kind of guy, when you look at his age and you look at his ceiling as a player, he could possibly go up. And that's what you want with Carson Wentz. You want potentially ascending players. You don't want descending players like Deshaun Jackson. Now, as we mentioned yesterday on the show, that's not to say you close the door, because you can't always get the players you want, and you have to go for plan B or plan C at times. But, yeah, Wheaton's the kind of guy that would fit what they're looking for because he's a very speedy receiver. And who knows, he could develop if he gets more balls thrown his way, which isn't going to be the case in Pittsburgh because they're so talented at the wide receiver position.
John McMullen has more on the Eagles in the NFL offseason. You can check out his Eagles coverage at 97.3 ESPN.com. Follow him on Twitter at JFMcMullen, and check out his NFL national columns at FanRag Sports NFL as the free agent period will be here before you know it. And it was always very active, it seems like, that early little just hit you over the head those first couple of days with moves all over the place. We'll see what Howie Roseman has up his sleeve. Thank you, John.
Hey, thank you, guys.
Yeah, NFL news and notes every day in the